Hello friends, welcome and welcome back to my channel. My name is Erin. This is your first time here. Welcome to Booked and Busy. So today we are embarking on a journey. Today is Sunday, Why do I keep saying May? March 19th. And up until this point, I have not had a 5-star read yet. And I refuse to go into quarter 2 with not a single 5-star. So this vlog is gonna stop when I get a 5-star read. Now, you in the future, you can look at the time of this video and you can see how long it's gonna take me to get a 5-star. This doesn't have a set TBR, but I'm going to be reading books that I think are 5-star predictions, books that are from authors that are given 5 stars, books that just have the vibe where I really think, for whatever reason, I'm gonna really like it. So I'm gonna share a couple books that I may read with you, but again, there's no set TBR because I'm really trying to figure out what my immediate mood is and read something that could possibly be 5 stars. So I'm gonna show you some of the books that I pulled that could give me 5-star vibes for whatever reason, and we're gonna get into it. So the vlog is gonna stop when I get a 5-star. I'm literally gonna say, give you my review, this is a 5-star, wrap, it's cut, it's done. This could be a short video. I've seen people get their video or their 5-star on the first try, on the second try. I've seen people have hour-long videos. This could be a 2-3 hour-long video. I don't know. You know, because you can see the time. But this vlog is gonna stop when I get a 5-star. Roll the tape. All right, so I've pulled books from a variety of genres. We've got Daphne by Josh Malerman. I gave The House at the Bottom of the Lake 5 stars. Really loved it. So this is his most recent release. I think it could be 5 stars. We've got this romance, Just Haven't Met You Yet. It just gives me 5-star vibes. Can't explain it. I've got an indie fantasy, like the next great dragon rider fantasy according to Patrick. That is Of Blood and Fire by Ryan Cahill. Dragon fantasy, come on now, that's me all over it. We've got The Turn of the Key by Ruth Ware, which is one of my 5-star predictions when I made that video last year, because it's just like everyone's like favorite thriller, everyone's favorite Ruth Ware. We've got Empire of Silence by Christopher Rocchio, which I truly believe could be a 5-star. I think this is going to be a new favorite series for me. Also, I tend to rate sci-fi highly because I read less of it. Options. I have a YA on here. I actually have 2. I don't know where the other one is, but we got Allegedly by Tiffany D. Jackson. I read The Weight of Blood last year, gave it 4.5 stars. This is one of people's favorite thrillers of hers, so it could be a winner. We've got Song of Silver, Flame Like Night. It's just supposed to be epic YA fantasy. So if I'm gonna like a YA fantasy, it's gonna be one that's epic. And one of my epic fantasy girlies on YouTube really enjoyed this, so I'm like, okay, I'm willing to give it a shot. And the writing seemed beautiful. And then we've got Episode 13 by Craig DeLuey. This gives me House of Leaves vibes. It is a found footage horror story about this ghost hunting reality TV show, and the specific Episode 13, and it's told in like this mixed media format, which gives me, like I said, big House of Leaves vibes. It's way less intimidating than that was, but I'm really looking forward to reading this one, and I've heard nothing but good things. So here are just some of the books I could pull from. The first book, I have no idea what it's going to be, because when I finish filming, I'm going to be like, what am I in the mood for right this second? And I'm going to pick a book. So I'll be back. Good morning, friends. So I have started my first book for the vlog, and that is Of Blood and Fire by Ryan Cahill, book 1 in The Bound and the Broken. So I am about 60% or 320 pages into this. This is 500 and I want to say 18 to 20 pages. I definitely plan on finishing this today. I've read this the last 2 days and I've been really enjoying it. I don't know if this is giving me 5-star feels exactly, but this is exactly what I needed in this moment, because A, this is a story I've read before, and I'll get into that in a second, but B, I have pea brain energy right now. The last fantasy book I've been reading has been Malazan, and that just takes up so much brain space that I just haven't had. So this is like perfect. So Of Blood and Fire is the first book in an indie fantasy series by Ryan Cahill. This came out in 2021. So the author has put out 3 books and 2 novellas in 2 years, which I think is fantastic, especially given the length. This first book is like 500 pages, book 2 is like 800 or 900 pages, and then book 3 is like 1,000 pages long, which to me is a good time. When I saw how long book 3 was, because it just came out, I was like, yeah, that's a bit of me, let me get into it. So in this story, it's a multi-perspective story where we have one primary POV, and that is this boy named Kalen. Now going into this is The Eye of the World meets Malice by John Gwynne, with the sprinkle of like elements from like Tolkien, but primarily it's those 2 stories together. It's easier to read than Malice because like a lot of people find Malice can be hard to get into, and because there's so many POVs, it can be intimidating for some. And then it's easier to read than, or less tedious to read than The Eye of the World because it's not overwritten and overly descriptive. This is so easy to read, so easy to get into. Like the writing is compulsively readable. Like I'm really enjoying it. This is like the first book in an epic dragon rider like fantasy series, and of course I had to use my one of my dragon bookmarks, you know, to match the vibes. So this is very like, when I tell you this is the typical fantasy story, you start off in this small town or this small village where these young boys are on the cusp of becoming men. And at the beginning of the story, we're in the middle of this like festival that the town is having a few weeks out from the proving. The proving is a ceremony where boys that are 18 have to go into the forest for 3 days and become men. And if they survive, obviously they you know, graduate to the title of being men. And there's a little bit of a competition because the group, because you can work in a group, that brings back the fiercest pelt of an animal, they are declared the winners of the proving, and it's a ceremony that takes place with all these neighboring villages together. And I want to say it happens, if not every year, every 3 years if boys are a certain age, something like that. And so we primarily follow Kalen as he and his 2 besties, Rist and Dan, go on this journey into the forest. And so we do get a couple other POVs. We get a POV from his sister. We get a POV of like this like elven man. A couple different POVs, but like I said, primarily we follow Kalen. And they go on this journey, and Kalen and his friends, they all, like, this is where it gets to be like Wheel of Time, because like there's no prophecy that's driving this story, which I think is, you know, a plus for a lot of people, because some people find that prophecies make the story less exciting because you kind of know to a degree what's going to happen. And there is a prophecy in both Malice and The Eye of the World. This doesn't have a prophecy, but you also have these boys who are in a way like Tavaran, which is the story and the events of this world like kind of gather around them, and they have an important role to play in the history of this world, or like the future of this world rather. And so we find out different things about these 2 main characters. And I haven't read Aragon, but the girlies say this is very similar to like the Aragon story, where boy finds dragon egg and they get attached and he's gonna be like a dragon rider. We kind of just got to that part at the 60% mark. But I've just been really having a good time. This is such a cozy, comforting fantasy. Like, even when like bad things are happening, like it doesn't feel stressful or anxiety inducing. And I really appreciate it. Like, people have honestly died. Like, people have been killed and murked. But like, yeah, I'm just like, oh, it's so cozy. And we had like giants and mages, and I last year had read the novella The Fall, and that was like the 2 entry points into this story. But I think I'm gonna reread The Fall after finishing this, because I think I'll appreciate it much more, because it is an event that happened like 400 years prior to the start of the story, but it's referenced often in the story because it has changed the landscape of the world and the political order, etc. But yeah, I'm really having a good time with this one. I'm 100% going to be finishing this today, so I'll be back later on this evening to give you my final thoughts, and we'll see. I don't know, I don't think it's going to be a 5-star. I can just say that now. I don't think it's going to be a 5-star. It's not going to be 5-star feels, but it's really enjoyable, and it's exactly what I needed in this moment, so I'm not mad about it at all. I definitely, like I said, I'm a sequel girly, so I definitely think like later books in the series could be 5 stars, but I'm really enjoying my reading time with it, and that's like the most important thing. Like, I wasn't really excited about picking up anything, and this was the only book that I was thinking about, like, I really want to read that. And so my bestie Steph was like, how about you just pick that one up then instead of doing these other things? And like, she's right, as usual. So I'm reading that. I'm gonna head to work because I'm LATE, and I'll come back to you with my final thoughts. Not to be like, oh, this vlog is cursed, but filming this vlog and being, you know, almost 4 months into the year at this point and not having a 5-star, I'm definitely like feeling the pressure. So let's talk about my reads. I have a lot of reading updates because I've been putting off this update for like 4 days. So I finished Of Blood and Fire by Ryan Cahill, the first book in the Bound and the Broken, and I really enjoyed this. I gave this 4 stars. This is the classic fantasy of my dreams, okay? It has all the things of like classic fantasy that I really enjoy, but it is a much more digestible and easy to follow writing style, and it's very engaging. Like I think I mentioned in the previous update, where this is like Malice meets The Eye of the World, but with dragons. And I definitely enjoyed the story even more when like the dragon part came in. I'm told, like I think I mentioned this also, this is very similar to Aragon. I haven't read Aragon to confirm or deny, but now there's a new Aragon book coming out, I may read Aragon now. But I really enjoyed this. This was so cozy. It was so nice to like curl up with this book, and that is disappointing because I picked up book 2. I read in the entirety of the 861 pages of this in about a day, and I gave it 2 stars. Woe is me. And I think I had the opposite experience as to most people, at least according to like the Goodreads reviews that I read. So this is Of Darkness and Light, book 2 in the Bound and the Broken. And for a lot of people, the critiques of book 1 that I see are that it's too slow, that nothing really happens, you know, this is a story that I've read before, da 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 da. And for those people, those were cons, but for me, those were pros. And it also was like, oh, you know, it takes too long for things to happen and for things to get going, and you know, not enough dragons, things like that. The pacing is like the biggest critique I've seen of book 1, but those are things that I loved about it. And I think if you read book 1 and you have similar critiques, you're going to love book 2, because it immediately starts out in the action. Like the first 20% is like action packed. You're in the middle, you're on day 5 of a battle, and like it just jumps right in. It throws you into the deep end, and you're fighting for your life, and it's so fast paced. So many things are happening, so much action, more dragons. Like I definitely feel like this is a example of, this is an indie fantasy for sure, because it's like, admittedly, the end of book 1, the pacing did pick up a little bit. We saw a little bit more action, but it's like the author saw and read all those critiques and was like, I'm gonna put all that into the second book and I'm gonna address all those concerns, versus possibly staying true to the story. But who knows? I don't know him. It could have been an intent all along to have a slow start and ease you into it, and then balls to the wall. But because of that, I just wasn't invested. Like in book 2, it picks up almost immediately, but like 5 days later, from the ending of book 1. And we also are introduced to some new POVs, and because we're introduced to those new POVs for the most part in like pretty high action sequences, I do not build character relationships and connection to characters through action. I build character relationships through slow pacing, getting to know them, getting invested in them, so that when the action happens, I'm invested and I'm concerned for their well-being. If I meet them and they're in the thick of it, I'm like, well, I don't know you, stranger, so if something bad happens to you, that's too bad. There was a lot of expansion into the world in this second one, but I, at various points, was like, I want to DNF this. And when I really considered DNFing it, I was like 700 pages in, and I was like, I've invested too much time to DNF now. There are some storylines that I really enjoy. Like I really enjoy Arden's storyline. I really enjoy, obviously my favorite character is Kaylin. I enjoy his storyline. Those are the ones that I care about the most. Don't really care about Wrist, sadly. don't really. Also, I hate Ella. I hate Ella so much. I hate Ella, but I'm really intrigued by Farda. And those two POVs are often in the same place. And so, because the book was so long and I already wasn't loving the pacing, being in POVs of characters I didn't care about, doing things I don't care about, wasn't the best reading experience for me, which is why it resulted in a 2-star. But, all that being said, the ending had a couple twists. And I was like, yeah, I'm gonna read book 3. I haven't done it immediately because I was too fed up. Because book 3 is like over 1,000 pages. But I was like, yeah, I see that in my near future. So that's that. I've read like a couple other things, but none of them were 5 stars, so I don't feel the need to mention them here. But I have started 2 more books for this vlog, and I'm about 30% ish, or around I'm a good ways into both of them, and neither of them are working for me. Like, they're not bad, I'm enjoying them, but I'm not excited to pick them up. Neither of them, I'm not like looking forward to reading them. And so, A, because I'm trying to find a 5-star, and B, like, I've had such a hard reading time already. It's like not, you know, on the heels of a 2-star read. This is not what I want to be. I want to be excited to pick something up. So, 2 books I'm reading. The first one is The Lost Queen by Sidney Pike. This is a historical fiction novel about Langareth, who was she's been lost to history. A Scottish queen from like the 16th century, maybe, I'm not sure. But she is believed to be the twin sister of the man who we all know as Merlin. And these are historical figures and people who existed, and they're twins, and so we're following her story. So I am 200 pages into this one, and it's picking up. It started out when she was 10. I don't like children to be following them. And so now she's about 15, 16, she's becoming a woman, and she's having more responsibilities, things like that. I will say the audiobook of this is phenomenal. The narration, 10 out of 10. The like Scottish accent, it really working for me. So I really enjoyed that. But like the story itself, because it's a single POV about a woman in history, you kind of need to be invested in that woman for it to be working for you. And right now I'm not. Granted, I still have 300 pages left of this, so plenty of time to get invested, but right now it's fun. The other book that I'm reading, I picked up another indie fantasy, and that is Nomads of the Sea by Kobe Zucker. So this is a multi-POV fantasy story where we are on the cusp of this like battle. So we follow this group of people in this Mandadal people, I think is what they're called. Mangal people, and he's a Mandadal, but okay, the Mangal people, they are a group of people who used to live in the water or on the water, and recently they have started, you know, they've created this like floating city. In the not too distant past, they were conquered by this empire, and they're in the process of negotiating, becoming more of a vassal, and rather than paying tithe to this empire, being paid for the supplies they provide to their ships and things like that. And in exchange for this, they asked for military aid to root out this like rebel force that was plaguing their lands. So in this one, it's multi-POV. We primarily follow McKissick, who is the heir to one of the like leading families of this community, and then we also follow Adalia, who is the daughter of like the counselor to the queen, and she is doing research, but I'm not sure how much she aware of the timeline, because in the beginning of this, the prologue is her mom like dying, but she's like, oh, I sent Adalia off, and I'm thinking Adalia is a child. She is a grown woman. And we also follow this like Aether mage who has escaped from captivity, and another POV. So right now, like, I am enjoying it. We're at the point where they're engaging with the enemy, and they're having like a series of like small battles and skirmishes. And this one, I think the pitch was like Rage of Dragons meets the Realm of Elderlings, which And I had to. It's a big claim. And I'm not seeing that thus far. Okay? It's well written. I'm enjoying it. I think there's a lot of potential, but for me, I'm not really a fan of a lot of little bitty battles to get to a big battle. It can work for me like it did in Dead House Gates, but I much prefer like preparing training sequences and like getting ready for that big battle versus like a little fight here, a little fight there. Like that just gets repetitive to me. But I am 160 pages into this one, and this is like 660 pages, so I literally have majority of the book left, so there's plenty of time for, you know, that surprised me. But like I said, I'm not loving either one of those, and I'm not excited to pick them up, so I'm just not reading as much as I could be. So I think, if you don't know this about me, I'm a person where I actively avoid books I think I want to enjoy, books I'm going to love. Like, something about them, they scare me. I'm just like, oh my God, I'm going to be obsessed. But I've been putting this off long enough, and I want to spark some joy. And I finally got in my sci-fi bag. I went from not reading any sci-fi to having read 3 sci-fi in March. And sci-fi is my jam. And so I think I'm going to pick up Pharaoh the 9th. I'm about to go to work. I'm late for work filming this update, but I think I want to go to work. I think I want to start this today. So when you see me again tonight, hopefully I have an update. This is the sequel to Getting the Ninth. Getting the Ninth was a 5-star read. I read it twice. It was a 5-star both times. It was a favorite book of the year that I read it the first time. And this is a long-awaited sequel. And this was originally a trilogy and is now a quartet. And this is just over 500 pages. So fingers crossed that it is a banger. So I'm going to go to work, and I'm going to come back with reading updates on the books. I finished my first book for this vlog, and that was The Blade Itself by Joe Abercrombie, Lord Grimdark himself, the first book in the First Law trilogy and the First Law universe. I didn't have any mid-book thoughts because I read this like on a crunch because I had like 12 hours until a live show, and I needed to sleep for at least 5 or 6 of those, so didn't really have the time to stop and share my thoughts. This is a book that is very much, you could call it a prequel or you could call it a setup book, and I think a setup book is more accurate because this book really focuses essentially on setting up this chessboard and putting these pieces in place for the greater story that's going to be told. So we primarily follow, this story primarily takes place in the Union, and so we follow a cast of different characters, some who are in the Union, some who are outside of the Union, but the Union sees itself as like the pinnacle of society, and people outside of the Union as like barbaric and as like savages. So a person I would say is our primary character is Sandan Glokta. He was the darling of this society. He was a champion. He was a nobleman. He was handsome. He was well liked. He was in the mix. And then he went off to war, and had he died, he would have been a hero. But instead of dying, he was a prisoner of war for, I want to say, 2 years. And he came back crippled and very much a changed person. Like he said, like the person that he was died on that bridge, and all that's left is like a shell of the person he used to be. And as a result of that, he has a lot of chronic pain. He has, you know, some deformities, one might say, and he is also working as a torturer. And there's like a conversation being had about like the cyclical nature of trauma, about how a person who was a prisoner of war and was tortured is now a torturer himself, and he, you know, does what was done to him in a way. The argument can be made about whether or not he enjoys it. I think he's just good at it. And you have his internal monologue about what he's actually doing versus the merits and how he interacts with the world around him and with his superiors and things like that, because he is aware that he is being pulled and pushed and prodded into this political situation. But he's like, there's no right thing to do, but you just got to see it through. You gotta see it through, my boy. So that's Glokta, and Glokta's actually very well known, and he's very well connected because he does have some connection to the other characters in the story. The next person that we follow is Jazal, who is essentially the next Glokta. He's a young nobleman. He's a fencer. He's on the way to becoming a champion himself. He's well liked and well regarded, but he doesn't really have the same fire and desire and this like spirit of excellency about him that Sandan Glockta had. And so we're following him as he is approaching this contest to decide if he's really gonna make a name for himself or if he's gonna be forgotten. And he is seemingly playing an essential role in whatever the greater story is that is to come. We also follow this man like Logan Nine Fingers, or the Bloody Nine, who is a Northman, and he is a famed warrior. He is able to commune with like the other side. He also mayhaps is a berserker. Not 100% confirmed, but mayhaps a berserker. And there are a lot of parallels with any fantasy book, honestly, especially in this era. This came out in 2006. That can be a lot of parallels drawn to a Game of Thrones. This also is blurred by George R.R. Martin, and I'm sure during that time it was a lot of publishers trying to find the next Game of Thrones. So he fights in the North. There are a lot of different tribes and clans and peoples, and over recent years you're seeing this one man come to power and subjugate all the other groups and unite them essentially under one banner and he's like declared himself king in the North basically. And he is taking this fight now from the North to the Union because they're fighting over Angland, and he's like, you need to cede Angland back to us, otherwise if you do that we won't have any problems. And obviously the Union isn't going to do that. And so Logan he was at one point, it would seem, a soldier fighting for this king in the North, but now he's on his own, and we see him on his quest because he is told that a mage is going to send someone for him. And so we follow the beginnings of his story where he's on this quest to meet up with this mage and figure out like what the next steps for him are, but his comrades assume him to be dead. Another minor character, we follow those comrades and what they're doing and how they're navigating the situation. We have another POV where we follow this like enraged woman who we don't really know much about, and in this world we have these like eaters type characters who are like cannibals, and the first law in this world is not to commune with the dead, and the second law is not to eat men. And so those things are connected, and I love when you like find out the meaning of the name of the title in the book, and like it's like the blade itself is the actual problem. It's where the crux of the problem lies. So ultimately people would tell you that this is a book that doesn't have a lot of plot, and I think that is pretty accurate. Another character that I didn't mention who isn't a POV character but is a very important character is Baez, who is this like immortal mage who has been several people in this union throughout history, and now the time has come and he's like having an Avengers Assemble moment because something is happening, something is going on. And so we follow these seemingly disparate storylines as they come together and embark on some type of journey, and that's kind of the next step. So that's my review of this one. Ultimately this is like a 2.5 star read. It was fine. That was my feelings about it. It was fine. Like, there wasn't a central plot pulling the story through, so I can't say that I enjoyed the plot. I am not particularly compelled or invested in any of the characters, and I feel like primarily I'm a world driven reader, and so I don't think the world building is particularly memorable or well done, or I don't think a lot of effort was put into building of the world because this world is quite similar to our own. I do have high hopes for the series as a whole, for the world as in the First Law universe as a whole, but I knew going into this book that this wasn't going to be a favorite, but I'm excited to continue reading and to see what I think of later books in the series. I will of course be reading the rest of the series because I'm participating in a like year-and-a-half long read along, so it's all good. But yeah, those are my thoughts on book 1, and I will talk to you when I read something else. Good morning, friends. Happy Tuesday. Hope you're doing well today. I am getting ready to go to work, and these are the first words I've spoken today. I don't know what I'm going to be reading today. If you saw yesterday's weekly update, you know that I was in the middle of 3 books. I finished Fourth Wing yesterday while I was at work. I DNF'd the wager on my way home because I like narrative nonfiction, and that really just wasn't working for me. Like, there were a couple interesting tidbits here or there, but I was 20% in and I wasn't enjoying the writing style, and I'm like, I didn't own it, I didn't spend any money on it. I could spend this 6 hours that I have left in this audiobook listening to something that I might enjoy more, so I'm not listening to that anymore. And then the last one was The Atlas Paradox. I have read more of this one. I'm now on part 5, Duality, so I'm 170 pages in, but honestly I'm not enjoying this. Like, for example, in comparison, on Sunday night I was like staying up late because I wanted to start something, and I started Fourth Wing and I was really intrigued by it, so I was like, oh, the minutes kept going by and I was like, I really need to go to bed, but I just want to read my book. Last night I was reading this and I was like, ooh, the time going up, I should go to sleep. I think I'm gonna go to bed, I'm gonna be responsible, and like, I would rather go to sleep than read this book. So I have a lot of thoughts about this. I think that it has even less plot than the Atlas 6, and I think the thing about the Atlas 6 was that it was mysterious, that it was intriguing. You didn't know for a long time what was gonna happen, what was gonna be the next step to pass this like first year, to go from 6 to the 6 aspirants to the 5 members of the society. You didn't know these characters, so you were getting to know them. You didn't really know the ins and outs of their specialty, so you were doing that. You didn't have a lot of information about the society, so you were learning as they were learning. These people didn't know one another. They knew that something was going to happen for them to come together, and so you're watching these complex interpersonal dynamics. And then in this one, there's a lack of intrigue, I think. In addition to there not being much external plot, I think that's not as big a problem, wouldn't be as big a problem for me if we still had the interesting group dynamics. Like, we rarely, in the beginning is very tedious because we're watching the initiation and we watch it happen through 4 of the 5 characters POV. So we watch this person get initiated, this person get initiated, this person get initiated, and it's very tedious. And then since then, we really don't see the whole group together interacting. And if you read Atlas 6, you know the changes that have happened in the group, and that has really negatively impacted the group dynamics. So you rarely will see more than 2 of them together, and some of them you really hardly see at all. You'll go 100 pages really without seeing this character, you'll go 100 pages without seeing this character, whether it's in their own perspective or just another character seeing them doing something. And so because of that, it's like the verbose writing style, the waxing poetic and tangents about math and science and theories and all of that, I don't care about that on its own. I cared about it because of what it meant to these characters. And like, there's one character dynamic where the science of it all isn't as annoying because they're trying to do something interesting, but for the most part, that means I need to get ready to walk out the door. For the most part, it's not doing anything interesting with this setup. And like, after the end of the Atlas 6, there's a shift, and you know that because of the shift, the perspectives and things are going to be different in here. And so that perspective is annoying. I do not like it at all. And I'm realizing that if I'm starting out a story and I'm kind of being told that all the characters are bad or questionable, I'm okay with that. And then once you introduce somebody that's a good guy, I'm like, why are you even here? Go away. I don't care about you trying to save the day and do what's right for the greater good. I don't care about the greater good. I want to see these bad people doing bad things and hurting themselves and one another in an intriguing way. I don't care about the rest of the world having access or having knowledge. Like, who cares about them? Nobody. So that's what I've got for you this morning. I have a bunch of books on my Kindle. I downloaded like a bunch of stuff yesterday just to see what I could read for this, and of course I do have my actual TBR, so I don't know, but I'll talk to you guys when I get off work and we'll see what I started reading. Good morning, my friends. Happy Wednesday. Hope you're all having a lovely day whenever you're watching this. I am now 70% of the way through the Atlas Paradox. I'm about 275 pages in, and it's slow going. And since we've last spoken, I think last we spoke I was on 40%, so I've been slowly, very slowly chipping away at this. And while it has gotten better and like the characters are interacting, like there's literally a line that addresses how little they've interacted. These people live in one single house. One single house. Is not a McMansion where it, or like a mansion where it's like 30 floors and all this other stuff where you can never. They live in a mansion or a manor house, right? And there are 5 initiates, okay? And in this scene we just read, they said, oh, it's literally been like 6 months since I saw you. Besides the fact that y'all bedrooms are all in the same like area and you live in the same house, 6 months since you laid eyes on them or had a conversation with them, that is the fucking problem. That is not exciting. That is boring. In a story where the plot is minimal and you wax poetic about all these different things, and the most driving force of the story are these messy interpersonal relationships and complex dynamics between these characters, you have 6 months go by in a world without the characters interacting, and we feel that and see that on the page. Girl, why did you think that was a good idea? Don't know. But things are moving quicker at this point. The characters are starting to interact with one another more, and we are starting to get some reveals about who people are, where people are in time. The various initiates are starting to go further and explore more of their abilities and specialties as they, you know, work on their like independent research projects. It's like their task for this like second year, because they have to contribute an original work to the archives, and we're learning more about the nature and sentience, if it's that, of the archives, and like more questions are being posed. And like on the one hand, I do like the philosophical questions being asked. I like a thought experiment, but a thought experiment with no forward movement or momentum in the story and no interesting character dynamics or interactions just doesn't do much for me as a story. And honestly, I don't want to DNF this, because if I DNF this book, I am a DNFing the series, because it's only 1 book left. And so I want to, in theory, I want to see where this is going, because I really enjoyed the first book. Even though it was a 3.5 and not like a 4 or 5 star, I enjoyed it and I had fun reading it, and I was very intrigued by it. I read it in 2 sittings. This is squandering, and I want to give grace, because this is the first sequel that Ally B. Blake has ever written, from my, at least published, whether it's independently or traditionally. And so also I know that the first book was reworked a little bit after it was acquired, and so I'm sure that also had to do with some tailoring of this, because I with the quick succession of this coming out, I know that it was written prior to, and because the first book was restructured, it had to be restructured. So I'm sure all of that impacted it. But Ally B. Blake's, at least in my experience thus far, and what I do believe, her writing is not the most suited for a multiple installment story. I think it can work very well in a single story, but because it's more about relationships and internal dynamics and the type of writing that she does, I just don't know that it's suited to a series. So I kind of want to see the conclusion of this journey, which obviously means I have to finish this book and then read the Atlas Complex when it comes out in January. And so that's why I'm reluctant to DNF this, but it's not an enjoyable time in the slightest, and it's very slow going, and like, and I am reading less because I'm reading this and I don't want to be reading it, and I'm not having a good time. I have like just over 100 pages left, and I really would like to finish this today, so maybe this will be what I focus on tonight during the sprints. But that's where we are with that. So I will talk to you all later when I get off work, and hopefully I have some reading updates. Friends, it is with great sadness that I report that after reading an additional 30 pages, I am DNFing the Atlas Paradox 75% of the way through. If you were on sprints last night, you know that I was really struggling with this, and I even read out a passage from the book, and I just can't take it anymore. So I'm DNFing this book, I'm DNFing this series. I hate that, because I had such high hopes for this book after reading and really enjoying the Atlas 6 and having some issues that I thought would be improved upon in the sequel, when instead the issues that I had were not addressed, and the things that I did like were removed from the story, and the things that I didn't like were ratcheted up a lot. So sadly, this is the DNF. I'm going to be unhauling the 3 copies of that series, or books in that series that I have, because I have 2 copies of the Atlas 6, the Fairy Loot edition and the original self-pub edition, and I have this Barnes & Noble edition of the Atlas Paradox. So that sucks. I so rarely, I don't know if this has ever happened, this might be maybe the second time it's actually happened, and both of those times have been this year, I think, where I like DNF a series through. And I guess in both of these cases I didn't own the next book, so often if I own it I'll just go ahead and continue, because earlier this year I DNF'd the 5 Warrior Angels, which is the BZB Book Club book. But yeah, it's so bad. It's so bad, and I have been reading that for 16 days, and it's only 415 pages. I've been reading it for 16 days, and I still have 100 pages left. Like, alright friends, so I've started my first book for this vlog, and that is Blood Over Right Haven by M.L. Wong. So this paperback edition was finally ready, so I got myself a copy, and I immediately dived straight into it. Originally, I was going to give you an update around the 25% mark, and I'm so happy that I waited. So right now, I am 300 pages, which is like 55-60% I think, into Blood Over Bright Haven, and let's talk about it. So my original feelings about this, for the first like 35%, I was like, it's fine. It doesn't really feel like M.L. Wong to me. It feels like just any other author. Like, I don't recognize the signature sauce that sort of like Kaigan had, and that's not a problem, but I'm just like, I remember being pretty invested quickly in sort of Kaigan and in our characters, and I didn't feel that way about Sayana and Thoma. And while this is dual POV, is really not. It's primarily from Sayana's story, because at this point we've only had 2, maybe 3 of the 14 chapters that I've read from Thoma's POV, and that was like the first chapter and then like a chapter that we just now had. So it primarily is Sayana's story, and Sayana is the person that's like on the cover here, and also the person that's on the cover of the hardcover, which was just announced. I'll pop a picture in right here, like the hardcover cover, because that is a different one than the paperback. So this is kind of a dark academia, dark magic, dark fantasy story about this young woman who is trying to become the first female high mage that this world of Turan has ever had. And she is fighting against a lot of the patriarchy and a lot of misogyny and things like that. But while she's also fighting that, she is very much racist against this like other group of people called the Quen that live in the city as well, and they come from like the outside of the barrier, and they're like the working class people in this society. And so it's very, let's say, interesting to hear her complain about the plight of women in this world and things like that. And I'm like, sis, if you extend this thinking a little bit further, you can probably connect the dots and understand a bit more about what's going on with the Quen. But she at the beginning of the novel, we see her right as she's taking this test to become a high mage, and because no women have ever been a part of the magehood or whatever at this level, they only allow women to test once every decade, and She is, as she's working and she's finding things out, she is tasked, because they don't respect her, she's given a janitor for a research assistant. But and that's our other character, Thomo. But Thomo is very much, on the one hand, it's argued that he's not like other Quinn, he's very intelligent, this and that, but he's like, actually lots of Quinn have my level of intelligence, they just aren't given these opportunities or whatever. So, you know, we can't really say, but the synopsis would have you believe that he is a bit more advanced than other people that he's from, simply because he was this hunter for so many years. It like leads him to have this like skill set. So that sounds pretty boring, to be honest, and it was very like meh to me. I've seen other people be really engaged from the beginning, but I've also seen Tammy had similar feelings to me, where she was like, you know, I was feeling pretty about the beginning, but there's a reveal at the 40% mark that changes the game. Obviously I'm not gonna spoil that reveal for you right here, but I'm much more invested and much more interested to see where the story is going. I don't know if this reads like a standalone, because I'm just wondering, like, if we solve or resolve the things that are going on in the story that are at the forefront of like the problem, that does feel like something that's going to have a lot of lasting repercussions and a lot more to do. So I'm wondering how everything is going to be wrapped up in these last 200 pages. I'm about to get into bed after I do my Duolingo lesson, and then I'm going to read more, and so I'll probably come back to you tomorrow once I have finished the entire book. So I know my review that just now hasn't been very informative really, but the only thing I'm really interested in is this thing that is related to the reveal, and until that's wrapped up, I'm not sure how to communicate that to you. But I'm about to reading this with Jocelyn, who we're still trying to bully into coming back to YouTube, so I'm gonna leave her in the description so you can go bully her as well, because you know, I can't carry the book community, the epic fantasy girlies, on my back by myself. We need more soldiers. So yeah, gonna read more of this and I will come back to you later. I will say it's not feeling like a 5 stars to me. Obviously anything could happen, but for me to be 200 pages into a book and really not be feeling the vibes, like, it doesn't scream 5-star to me. So I'll let you know. Friends, I am back. I have finished Blood Over Bright Haven, and I gotta say, this was pretty disappointing. So I'm settling on a 3-star rating. I think you could tell from my initial update clip at the 50% mark that I had pretty positive feelings about it, but that I wasn't in love with it, and most of that had to do with the fact that I didn't think that the story really became interesting until the 40% mark. And for me, I think that the way where this book falls flat is, I think, with the characters. We primarily follow Sayana. This is Sayana's story for sure. I think we have a total of 3, maybe 4 chapters throughout the whole book of Thomo's POV. And while he does play an important role in the story and in Sayana's character growth and arc, he is not a major part of the like narrative itself. And Sayana was a character that I personally didn't like and was hard to root for. Like, I mean, I think she's hard. She's not meant to be likable because she's a flaming racist. Like, that's very clear from the beginning. And we see her grapple with this idea and her own struggles of misogyny and being in this world that is run by men, and there not being any women in high magistry, and women's accomplishments and achievements being tied to their sons and their husbands and their fathers and things like that, and like what the role of women are. But she like is unable to just extend that thinking a little bit further into what that is like for the Queen and the people who keep their society functioning. And she, you know, it takes her a long time to come to grips with her racism, and by that point it's almost too late for her to be redeemed. And I appreciate the depth with which she wrote this character, because she has spoken about, like in her blog posts and things like that, how difficult this was to write and how it was like soul rendering almost. If you know where that's from, you know. And I can see how being in the mind of a flaming bigot is very difficult, and writing from their perspective and also trying to make them a person you can empathize with. and Sayana was insane, and she got to a point where other people around her knew she was insane, and she was like, yeah, I know, but that's not the point. Like, let's stick to the point. And I have to respect that. Ultimately, I personally would not call this a dark academia. I know it's been marketed as that, the girls are saying it is that. It doesn't take place in a school setting. There is learning happening and like experimentation, but the magic in here is almost like math, and I didn't enjoy math. Like, I am a, you know, humanities type of gal. Like, the equations of this and that, and the force of this and that, and the coordinates and this, and it wasn't doing it for me. It really wasn't. This was sadly a very disappointing follow-up to the Sword of Kaigen, which I loved. I love the magic, I love the world building, I love the characters, and I remember being invested pretty early on. I've been buddy reading this with Jocelyn, who I've been talking about all the time, and we were talking about how different our experiences were with Sword of Kaigen, because she was like, she kind of felt similarly about Sword of Kaigen's characters, and then she had to come back and eat her words when she found out how invested she was. And I remember being very invested in that from the beginning. And I also think that this story probably, to me, could have been a little bit better had we gotten more of Thomo, because the racism toward the Quinn and things like that were such a large part of the story, but the actual Quinn character was in the background, even though he was an essential part of helping Sayana and things like that. So ultimately, I think a lot of people could like it. I can see the Babel comparisons. I don't personally agree, but I do see the comparisons, and I did like this more than that, but not by that much, to be honest. This didn't seem, admittedly, I've only read 2 things from Vera Wong now, Sword of Kaigen and this, but these don't seem like the same writer. And, you know, who knows, after 4 or 5 years and writing in a different type of genre, because this is much more urban, even though Sword of Kaigen, one part of it was pretty urban, that's not the part that we were focused on. So it just tonally, it felt very different. I like that the ending packed a bit of a punch, but ultimately this is not one I will be revisiting, and especially with it taking so long to really get interesting, you just having to suffer through racism and bigotry and an insufferable character, it's a no for me, dog. Let's talk about The Unmaking of Pharaoh by Adrienne Young. Yet another book that should not be in this category. If you watched my video where I read and ranked the first chapters, you would have seen that when I went to the bookstore, this was in the fiction section. If you look up a lot of the reviews for this book, you look at the Goodreads tags, the first thing that is tagged as, it's fiction. And if you want to go a step further and, you know, comment on the speculative elements, the primary speculative element is a sci-fi element. But let's get into it. Unlike the other books where I just filmed a sit-down review, this is one that I actually read while I was filming this vlog, but I had so many thoughts and so many feelings, and I hated this book so much that I just couldn't bring myself to talk about it, because I felt like if I talked about it and I started giving my review, I would DNF it, and I really was trying to avoid DNFing books in this video. But baby, strap in. So The Unmaking of Pharaoh is about this woman who is the last surviving member of the Pharaoh family. The Pharaoh family is a family of women who are known to go mad, and it starts to happen usually after they have children, and they also experience this like melding of things that did or did not happen. And our main character, Pharaoh, she is a special case because her mom disappeared, came back and like dropped her off and disappeared again, and she was raised by her grandmother. And unlike previous Pharaoh women, her grandmother never shared the things that were behind why the Pharaoh women went mad, for reasons unknown to the reader and unknown to Pharaoh throughout the entirety of this book. Now, this isn't a synopsis, but if you're a person who does not read synopses to avoid any type of information, you might want to skip past this, because this is going to tell you what's going on in the book, but it isn't a synopsis, so I don't consider it a spoiler. This is a book about time travel. And if you know anything about time travel, like I said earlier, time travel is a sci-fi concept. And the difference between what you might have in a fantasy would be like a portal, like you go through a door into a new world. And while the time travel in this book does function through going through a door, you're not going through a door to a new world, you're going through a door to the same place but a different time. And the way now this isn't something that's in the synopsis, but the way that the story develops, these timelines in certain ways can overlap, because when the women are going mad, they're just having memories of their lineage and of the other things that have happened in this timeline but in previous years. So at the center of this story, A, is our main character time traveling and going back to the year 1951 and trying to solve the mystery of herself, what's going on with the Pharaoh women, and how she can, you know, potentially stop herself from going mad and losing her sanity. And also, they're in this town. I think they're in Kentucky. I could be making it up, but I don't know what the place is named. I might be mixing this up with Starling House. In this town, there is this mystery that has been happening is a 70-year-old mystery, because it takes place in the beginning in 2023, about this pastor in this town who was murdered, and the murder was never solved, and it's a relatively small community, so you know there's a lot of suspicion, a lot of intrigue about who solved it, who killed him. And his son was like the sheriff, and there are so many news articles, and even in 2023 it is like a specter that hangs over the head of this community. And my first problem with this book is that for a book that is about time travel and a book that primarily takes place in the past, the first 30% of the novel takes place in 2023. And there's really not much going on. It's just our main character who believes she's going crazy, and the book like opens up with her at her grandmother's funeral and burying her grandmother, and she's grieving and going through this process, and she starts to feel like the symptoms of the Pharaoh curse are things that she's really starting to feel the symptoms of, and she is, you know, trying to solve that, and she's also attempting in some ways to solve the mystery of what happened to this pastor. Okay, and she's getting these memories, and she's seeing these things that she feels like are not there, are not real, and she gets this inkling and this hankering to go and explore and to do, and that leads her to traveling back to 1951. Now, in an endeavor to not spoil this book, I'm not really going to say anything about the plot beyond that, but what I will say is that this book offends me. And I say that because, you know, obviously I'm black, so you know my situation might be a little bit different, but I think you would be hard pressed to find a person of color in America who would willingly leave 2023 and all the rights and, you know, liberties that we have, the civil liberties, and willingly go back to 1951 and live. Are you serious? Like, if anything, that's the fantasy. Choosing to live in 1951. Like, what? Schools weren't even integrated in 1951. This is one of the worst books I have ever had the misfortune of reading. And similar to my review of How to Sell a Haunted House earlier this year, I am so sorry to all of the trees that had to die, and the minuscule amount that the planet warned because of these trees having to die for the pages of this book to be printed. That's how bad it is. This book personally offends me. It is not fantasy. That's the first thing. It is not fantasy. It's fiction, and fiction can have speculative elements, but it takes place in the real world. And if you want to even go even further, you can say it's historical fiction, because the primary setting of the book is 1951. So it's so many other places it could be, and fantasy is the last place. The real only reason that it's in fantasy is because this author's her first, like, I don't know, 6, 7, I don't know how many books she had written prior to Spells for Forgetting and this, but all of her YA works were fantasy, and so her adult works were immediately put into fantasy. I have not read Spells for Forgetting, but from what I've heard about it, it's primarily like a mystery. But I have read The Unmaking of June Pharaoh, and I know that it isn't a fantasy book. It's anything else but fantasy. And on top of all of the things, it is awful. It is god awful. I would not recommend this to my worst enemy. Like, I like my worst enemy more than enough to not recommend this book. That's how bad it is. If this is on your TBR, take it off. Take it off. Do yourself a solid and take it off. It's about to be a new year. I know everyone has these New Year's resolutions, and I don't think anyone's New Year's resolutions, I want to hate myself more. I want to treat myself worse. And you know what? Doing this book would be treating yourself worse than you already do. So, that's the review. Hello, friends. I come to you. Hello, friends. I come to you, hat in hand, bowing my head with bad news. Awful news, really. So, I have started the first book for this vlog, and not only am I not liking it, I'm actively disliking it. One might say that I hate it. I have come very close to DNFing, but I have hyped this book up for myself and for y'all for so long that I just refuse to DNF. And the book that I'm talking about is Empire of Silence. A moment of silence. I know. So I am 50% into this, and I have some thoughts, but to really illustrate for you how much I'm disliking this, I started this book on Friday, and it took me 8 days to read the first 200 pages, and that's with me reading it every single day. And then I made the executive decision that I'm not going to DNF, but I'm really not enjoying it. It's taking me ages to get through, so let me pick up the audiobook. And now I've made it to halfway. With the audiobook, I read it much quicker because I'm just like, whatever. Y'all, this hurts me so much. It cuts me so deep. But let's talk about what I'm not liking about it. So first and foremost, the synopsis is a lie. The synopsis, it's a lie for this book. It might be the synopsis for the greater story of the series, but it is not the synopsis of this book. The synopsis says it was not his war. The galaxy remembers him as a hero, the man who burned every last seal sim from the sky. They remember him as a monster, the devil who destroyed the sun, casually annihilating 4 billion human lives, even the emperor himself, against imperial orders. But Hadrian was not a hero. He was not a monster. He was not even a soldier. All of that does not happen in this book. That is not this book at all. That is probably the story, the overarching story of the series. And this is like, the series is kind of like his villain origin story. But that is not what you're going to get in this book. So the next paragraph says, on the wrong planet at the right time for the best reasons, Hadrian Marlowe starts down a path that can only end in fire. He flees his father and a future as a torturer, only to be left stranded on a strange backwater world. So the first like 150, 200 pages of this is just us meeting like 20-year-old Hadrian as he's on his home world, as he's whining and complaining about what he wants to be in the future and whether or not he wants to be his father's heir, and not wanting to be his father's heir, but also not wanting his brother to be the one to inherit, and watching him be pitiful and watching him get beat down in the street by teenagers. And even though he's been training with professional soldiers and lancers and all this his entire life, but he can't even defend himself against a group of ruffians. And then we watch him escape and go on this journey, only to wake up on this backwater planet and live life as a beggar on the streets for 3 years, eating from the trash can, stealing food, getting beat up again, sleeping in the gutter. Like, I'm sorry, but I struggle to take it seriously. I struggle to take my warmonger seriously when he's a beggar on the street. Then it says, forced to fight as a gladiator and navigate the intrigues of a foreign planetary court, Hadrian must fight a war he did not start, for an empire he does not love, against an enemy he will not understand. So he's not forced to fight as a gladiator at all. He volunteers to fight as a gladiator to get money for himself. And like, it might seem like I'm spoiling the book, but I'm not. like, yes, these are things that happen throughout the book, but if I want you to have a better experience than I had, I want you to go into this book with the correct expectations, because the expectations that I had based on the synopsis, it doesn't match what's in the book. And if you actually know what the book is about and you're interested in wanting to read it, then that's a whole different thing than what the synopsis tells you and like what's actually in the book. So you have a poor money rich boy who wants to escape. His escape is thwarted and he ends up in a very unfortunate situation on his backwater planet, and because he doesn't want to admit who he is, because he again tried to escape from his father, he lives as a beggar and then decides to go fight as a gladiator to win money so that he can get a spaceship and get off world, because his real mission, he wants to become a scholiast, which if you read or watched Dune, he wants to become a scholiast is basically this world's equivalent of a mentat, which is like a human computer. Basically, he wants to become a scholar, a human computer, and like he's really adept at languages, and he wants to learn the secrets of the galaxy, and that's what he wanted to do. He wanted to go forth into the world and train as a scholar, but he's the son of a lord and all that, and that's like not a fitting station for him. And so because of his big ass mouth, he gets himself in a lot of situations and a lot of circumstances that would be better off avoided, and that could be avoided if he learned to shut up. At this point in the story, Hadrian is very unlikable. His inner monologue or his inner dialogue is very unpleasant to read because he just whines. He like whines and like waxes poetic on his thoughts about things, and he goes off on these like little side tangents. Like, I'm disliking this so much. Like, I can't even explain to you how much I do not like it, and it hurts me so much because like, this was a 5-star prediction. I'm obviously reading it here because it is a 5-star prediction. This was a new favorite series. You can see right here up there, I have the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th books on my TBR, because I'm like, this is gonna be my new favorite series, on my priority series. And now, when I first was interested in reading it, because I bought this book in 2021, it has increased in popularity since then. When I first picked it up, and I, recently reviews have started coming in, and everybody's like, oh, it's 5 stars, it's amazing, it's great, it's great, it's great. And that's because like Patrick and Daniel have been reading it. But now that I've said that I don't like it, people are like, okay, well, the first book isn't that great, and Hadrian is very insufferable, but like book 2 is like a major step up. And like, this is a series that the girlies are touting is like neck and neck with Red Rising, might overtake Red Rising as the favorite, the best sci-fi series. And I'm like, what? I was promised a warmonger. I was promised an emperor killer. I was promised a person who was gonna kill 4 billion people. Not that person isn't getting beat up in the streets. Darrow would literally never. So I'm not liking this. I'm very upset. I'm very hurt by the fact that I'm not liking this. I went out of my way, so far out of my way, to get this book and to get these books in hardcover because they've been out of print. There's been this whole thing. So yeah, it's not doing much for me. I'm planning on finishing this tomorrow because I listened to the audiobook, so I don't have too many tasks that I can do tonight that I need to do tonight to listen to an audiobook. So I'll probably finish it on my commute tomorrow back and forth to work. But yeah, I just want to let you know that things are not looking good for us so far, friends. I have actually finished Empire of Silence, and I'm here to give you my final thoughts. Was it a 5-star? I think based on the things that I said earlier about this book, we both know that it wasn't. It's very sad. It's a very sad day here in the Booked and Busy house, that probably the book that I had the highest hopes for is not a 5-star prediction. And beyond it not being a 5-star, I almost want to say it's the opposite of a 5-star. Like, I'm not rating books this year, but if I had to rate it, this would probably be like a 1 to 2-star read. And that pains me greatly. Beyond that, I wanted to DNF this book multiple times, and the only reason I didn't DNF it is because I do plan on continuing on with the series, because I did a little bit of research, talked to a couple friends. People say like the first book isn't the best. Like, I'm gonna just be honest, it's a debut novel as well. The first book isn't the best, but there's like marked improvement in book 2, and a lot of people say that about Red Rising. Although I am not a person who disliked the first book, I really liked the first book, but I loved the second book. So I'm like, okay, with longer series, especially since I already have them, I am willing to give a series more than one book if there's a level of intrigue. And I think my primary issue with this book is that the story that's being told in here is not the story that's advertised in the synopsis. This is very much, you know, it's somewhat of a coming of age story, but the synopsis tells you the end, and this is starting at the beginning, and the synopsis tells you about the entirety of the series, I guess, rather than the entirety of this book. And beyond that, Hadrian is a very unlikable character, and I kind of feel that the way that I feel about this is the way a lot of people feel about Darrow, and the way a lot of people feel about Red Rising, where this main character is just unsufferable. He's unsufferable. He is so unlikable. He's so whiny. He thinks he's so damn smart. He is just the worst. I want to say he's the scum of the earth, but he lives on a different planet. So he's like the scum of the galaxy, I guess. He is awful. He is someone who, you know, has these like grand ideals of himself that do not match the reality. He's very whiny. He's very pitiful. He's an awful person. And if he was an awful person in that he was evil and violent and murderous and all that, I could get with that. But he's awful in that he thinks that he's a great guy, but he makes every situation worse every time he opens his mouth. And he's, you know, unlikable, but he's not unlikable in a way that's fun to dislike or fun to hate. It's just hard to get through. Like, physically reading this, it took me over 7 days to read the first 200 pages, and then I had to switch to the audiobook to finish it because I was disliking it so much. At this point, this is not a book that I recommend, and I've talked about this so heavily, and I feel like I've put this on so many people's radars because of my excitement about the book and the series and the synopsis. But the synopsis and the book are not aligned. They're not in alignment at all. I am planning to read the second book, and I want to read it soon before, you know, I lose motivation. But I'm so disappointed. This like hurts me so deeply because it's so bad. It's so bad. Like, there aren't any redeeming qualities that I can actually tell you about this book. And that pains me to say. Also, it really doesn't feel very sci-fi-ish. It is like, you know, we take a space adventure, even though that mostly happens off page. You know, spaceships and things are mentioned. There's like this alien force that is discussed, but it doesn't feel like a space opera. It doesn't feel like a sci-fi book, and maybe it's because it's just so bad, and that's a failure of the writing, that it doesn't really feel like what it is. But I'm hoping that the sequels, Hadrian becomes a person that I can get behind, or at least he starts doing things that I find interesting, because he was just too pitiful for most of this book, like really for all of this book. He has no agency. He's just like a puppet, and I like characters that move the story. I like characters that their actions impact the story versus the things that happen in the story just impacting them. He is in my mind a very passive character, and just things just constantly happen to him. He is not the driving force of the story. He just goes from one bad situation to the next, but not in a way that's endearing. And because he's so unlikable, it's not a case where all these bad things happen for him and I feel bad for him. I'm just like, that's what you get. Hello friends. So I've started my next book for the vlog, and I am 25% into Vera Wong's Unsolicited Advice for Murderers. So usually I wouldn't give an update this early, but I've had a bad habit of like, oh, I'll give an update at 50% mark, and then 50% comes, and then I blink, and then I'm done with the book. So here we are. I started this morning on my commute to work, and I listened to it again on my way home, and I got through 85 pages, and so far I'm having such a fun time. Vera is such an interesting character. She's so funny. And surprisingly, we are following 2 other POVs. It might be more than 2, but I think so far it's just 2. One is sauna and one is Reiki. And looking into the actual book, there are like notes that Vera is taking. So there is a little bit of a mixed media element. I don't know if that continues throughout the book, but that's just a nice little touch. So in this story, we're following Vera Wong, who is a Chinese immigrant. She's not a grandma, but she's like in her 60s or something like that. And she runs a tea shop, and it's called Vera Wong's like world famous tea shop. And but it's not world famous. She doesn't have many customers, and actually the business isn't making money until one day. I love when a book just starts. I love like when we don't spend a lot of time just developing, we just go straight into it. One day she comes downstairs and there's a dead body in her tea shop. So she calls the police come, and like based on what she's seen on TV, she's expecting the police to really get into it, for there to be CSI, forensic teams, like DNA tests, like all these things. And the police don't take it seriously at all. They don't even think that it's a murder. They think it's like, you know, they don't think there's any foul play involved. So Vera takes it upon herself that she is going to investigate what's going on, and we're following her on her investigation. And Vera is so funny because she puts out this like obituary to like try to get people who are interested in the death to like come to her tea shop, and she like starts calling them suspects. And so she's interacting with her suspects, and I just read this one scene where she like fixed food and tea for her suspects, and then she's like, oh, my next suspect just arrived, and she's talking to them, and she's like, oh, asking them about the zodiac signs, and they tell her, and they're like, oh, y'all look perfect for each other, y'all should date. And you know, the guy's like, you think we're suspects in a murder? She's like, well, just because I think you're a murderer doesn't mean I think you're a bad person. She's just so funny. Like, also the audiobook does really add to the experience because the narrator has like a little bit of a different voice that they're using when they're speaking, when they're narrating the book and like reading the exposition, versus when Vera is actually speaking. And then Vera will talk about how she like, you know, ups her like Chinese accent, or like she understands less English when she's talking to Americans, because that really works on them. But this is just really fun. So the mystery that is happening is that we're following this guy Marshall. He pops up dead in Vera's tea shop, and one of the characters that we're following is Marshall's wife, who the night before he died, he left her. And you know, so she's one of the suspects. We also follow Reiki, who we don't really know Reiki's connection to Marshall just yet, but also there is another POV, and there's Oliver, and Oliver is the twin brother of Marshall. So we're following this larger cast of characters who are all connected to Marshall in some way, and to a degree each of them has expressed some level of guilt that they feel attached to something that happened that caused Marshall's demise. So I'm interested to see how the mystery develops. I'm really enjoying it so far. It's a very quick and easy read. This is only 340 pages, so I don't anticipate it taking me too long, but I am going to read some more. I probably won't read more tonight because I don't know that I have any tasks that require an audiobook, but I'm actually enjoying this. I want to give you guys at least one more update before I finish, as you know, we get more information, but I am really liking it, and I did want to give you the initial thought. And like, I want to just say this, technically this is the third book that I've read for this, or I started reading for this vlog, and so far every book has been a success. Like, I'm not rating books this year, but I mean, I can tell you right now, like the 7 Year Slip, I really loved it. It was like, it could have been a 5-star. It wasn't quite, but it could have been. And then His Majesty's Dragon, spoiler alert, I've read the next 2 books in the series. That's why it's taken me, you know, so long to get back to this vlog, because I skedaddled and I read books 2 and 3, and I bought book 4 as well at the store. So here we are at the third book, the third author I'm giving a second chance. And so far, even if like none of the other books work for me, this is already proving like this vlog is a success, because I'm already having such a good time with these authors. And so that may, and I know this in other parts of my reading life, but you know, just because I'm not necessarily a person who I love everything that an author comes out with, but if a synopsis or a storyline is intriguing to me, just because I haven't liked something in the past doesn't mean that I can't like something that this author comes out with, as long as it, you know, I find it interesting. So I'm gonna go back and read some more, and then we'll talk. Hello friends, I'm back for another update. I have read more of Vera Wong's Unsolicited Advice for Murderers. I am now on chapter 27, which is like 230 pages in, and I have just under 100 pages left. And so I'm listening to the audiobook till it says about the 70% mark. So I did say that I wanted to give you guys an update before I finish, and I am loving this so much. Like, honestly, I don't care about the mystery. I don't care about the mystery at all. I love Vera. I love Vera so much. And this book is low-key giving found family trope. So Vera, Julia, baby Emma, Ricky, Oliver, Sana, they're just like all these people who like need each other. They need each other, and their life is enriched by it. And like at the beginning when we meet Vera, she's kind of lonely, and her son really doesn't spend a lot of time with her, doesn't make her feel like a priority, whatever. And I think that's something that is true, or can be true, a lot about parents and grandparents when they get older and they don't have anyone to take care of. And so like the desire to feel needed, they don't have it anymore. But Vera meets these people involved in this investigation, and these are people who need her, or people who could benefit from having her around, and like, you know, need someone to believe in them, need someone to support them, need someone to give them a kick in the pants. And like, just, it's just really so great to see. Like I'm loving this so much. Like I honestly am so surprised, because obviously this is an author that I DNF'd before. I didn't even make it 50 pages into the book that I read from her. And then also, like, this is a mystery book, and I don't actually care about the mystery, and like, the mystery is fine, but the mystery is just a vehicle for us to get this found family. And to see Vera interact with these people and like see that she's got this exciting life going on now, and things are looking up for her, and just how much joy and fun that this tragic situation really has brought into her life. And even her son is like, Mom, like, what are you doing? Like, come stay with me, you know, whatever. She's like, oh no, I'll stay with my friend. And like Julia and Em, honestly, it's a good thing that Marshall's dead, because he sounds like a fucking horrible person. He was a bad father, a bad husband, a horrible brother, just all around no good. So I'm loving it. I'm loving how Emma, but I'm loving how Vera has come. She started to stay with Julia and Emma because something happened at her tea shop, and just how, you know, she's helping build them back up. Like Emma is coming out of her shell more. She's interacting with Vera, and Vera like treats her kind of like her own person, and she's giving, you know, her mom the confidence to be her own person again as well, and to not be so nervous and so anxious all the time, and like having someone that supports her and believes in her. It's like, you can do this. And watching Vera have these relationships with each and every one of them, and she's just so funny as well. She's like, oh, these are such a good boys, they might be murderers, but they're still such a good boy, so I'm just gonna make buns for everyone. And I'm having so much fun. Like, it's just so good. It's so excellent, and I'm excited to see, I guess, how it comes out. And I hope that the way it ends, it shows and it leads us to believe that Vera is going to continue to be a part of their lives, because that's what I'm here for. I'm really here for the found family. So I'm gonna go ahead and finish this. I have a thumbnail that I need to make for tomorrow's video, so I'm gonna listen to the rest of this, and I'll come back with my final thoughts. Friends, countrymen, I come bearing the best news. I have finished Vera Wong's Unsolicited Advice for Murderers, and it's a 5-star. Favorite book of the year. I literally cried multiple times while I was reading it. The last like 20%. I had to let everyone in my Discord know. I had to FaceTime Steph. Like, according to Google, is in 470 days. It's my last 5-star, which was Kiss Her Once for Me, which I read like the first week of December 2022. And here she is. She is the moment. Like, she is an icon. I love this book so much. I love Vera so much. This book invented found family trope. Like, this is the best found family trope I've seen outside of a fantasy book. Like, I've never seen contemporary books do found family like this. And this is truly just so much fun. It's so heartwarming. And while I said earlier, like, I wasn't as invested in the mystery, I just really cared about the characters. The way the mystery came together in the end, I was surprised, and I really enjoyed it. And it just seeing it all come full circle, and seeing Vera wrap her arms around all these people, and in turn watch all these people wrap their arms back around her, and this community and this family. Just, this vlog has been such a success. I don't know how to explain it. Like, we had a romance that I absolutely loved. We had a fantasy series that I marathoned the first 3 books. We got my first 5-star in 400 and something days. Like, almost 500 days. Like, clearly, if it isn't clear by now, you should be giving the authors a second chance. Because perhaps it's not that you don't like the author, it's just that that book didn't work for you. I'm going to celebrate this momentous occasion by taking a trip to Barnes. And I just need to be around the books. And then before you say it, I know, but it's not the same. It's not the same. But, you know, just want to, I think I'm going to Barnes all day. And now I want to celebrate. And how else do you celebrate a 5-star read? I'm not going to the bookstore. Like, if you have any other alternative suggestions of how I can celebrate my next 5-star read, please leave them down in the comments. But yeah, March has been looking up for me. Spring is for me. Like, oh, I love this so much. I just was sitting and crying. Like, it was so good. I was feeling the 5-star feels. Like, the fact that this is my 3rd update I filmed for this book lets you know, because recently I've talked about this in my weekly vlog. I had taken like 3 weeks off vlogging. I really wasn't in the mood to pick up the camera. I would be reading books and I would finish the whole book and I really didn't have much to say, even if it was a book for a vlog. But my first vlog for this, my first update, I wasn't even 100 pages in and I had so much to say. And I continue to have so much to say. And this book is so amazing. If you have not picked it up already, you need to pick it up. And I highly, 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 highly recommend the audiobook. I implore you to read the audiobook, because the narration and the way it just brings Vera to life and just, it's so good. It's so, so good. So I'm gonna go to Barnes and I'm just gonna bask in my 5-star